At this point of time, parents find it very difficult to manage this kind of situation. Second thing is whether providing whatever you want to provide for the child. This is again another issue, because child may not be expecting whatever you are providing, or its needs may be different. And when you provide something else, that becomes a kind of mismatch, which will lead to a confusion and in the child, which may also lead to other psychological issues. Apart from providing uh, uh, materialistic things to the child, it is also important to provide emotional bonding for the child. There are a lot of studies on nurturing in psychology, where by providing materialistic things, child will not be satisfied. It needs a kind of emotional bonding with their parents. So parents will have to spend a lot of time with their child. So uh, again, they will have to spend time in playing with the child, talking to the child, giving reactions to child's feelings. So these are all the important things that one has to do. Even when the child is grown up, say if child is in the primary school or in the secondary school, in most of the Indian houses or Indian families, we are not giving enough time for emotional sharing. The parents are not sitting with the child and start sharing their feelings. Rather, they will be only talking about whatever has happened in the house or in the day. This has to change. People have to start talking about their emotions, talking about their feelings, so that child also gets acquainted, also, and also as well as child becomes more comfortable sharing its feelings, which becomes very very important when child reaches adolescence. Because if this kind of ecosystem is created for sharing of feelings, then certainly child becomes more flexible, or child becomes more open to share whatever the feelings or whatever the confusions that it faces in its mind during adolescence. So that's why emotional bonding is very very important. uh, Hope I am audible to all. Someone's saying there is no audio. Am I audible?
Yes, Akshara, you are audible.
Okay, okay, yeah, okay. Now, what has to be provided to the child? Now, when we talk about positive parenting, when we know that what should not be provided to the child, it is also important for us to understand what has to be provided to the child. First of all, a space for expression of feelings. This is again one of the important things that I have been noticing in my clinical practice. Uh, that in the present day, a lot of people are not in touch with their emotions. So most of us are totally maybe we think ourselves as logical, rational, and practical. However, unless we get in touch with our feelings, we cannot be human. This is the basic tenet with which we need to look at the child rearing practices. In child rearing practices, it is also important for both father and mother to take equal role in the parenting. Because uh, if even one person or one of the parents doesn't take role and left out only in some other activities, then child doesn't get connected with that parent. So the first thing is to give space for expression of its feelings. Second is child needs a sense of security. Now when we talk about security, it starts from providing warmth to the child from its early childhood. So unless you provide warmth, the child may not feel secure from the beginning. And at the same time, you also should ensure that you are there to help the child if it finds difficult to perform any task. Now it doesn't mean that you are available all the time. you should provide enough time for the child to experiment on its own. You should provide child to fail, space to fail, because unless child tries on its own to figure out the things to do, and if you are always this has also been observed that many children who are pampered in their childhood, and at a later stage when they reach adulthood and they have to manage their own things, it becomes really difficult for them to face failures, take responsibilities, and so on. And always allow the child to experiment. Child should not be restricted from experimenting things. Of course, if there is a danger, then certainly uh, you have to be careful and you have to caution the child, but otherwise you should always allow it to experiment. And the learning through experiment is really more stronger for a child for its lifetime. That at the same time, I also want to emphasize that you should not be overprotective. The more overprotective you are, the more vulnerable your child will be. Unless you allow or you give some kind of autonomy for the child, it will not learn to take decisions. Whenever there is an issue, whenever there is a problem, it will start seeking your help or starting to you to sort it out rather than trying it on its own. When we look at parenting, parenting is not just but the parenting has an influence in growing one's personality. So unless you give certain amount of autonomy, child will not learning or taking responsibilities. And one more important thing that I would like to emphasize is don't impose your ideas, which means that if you feel something is good, it may not be good for the child, because every individual is different and every child is different. And though it is your own child, it may have totally different perspective from what you think. So don't impose your ideas on the child. But at the same time, I would also like to say that you need not refrain from giving suggestions. For example, if I have to take my practice, some of the youngsters in their say after 10th standard or 12th standard, a lot of people face this difficulty that parents will be imposing certain things on them, right from choosing the course, choosing the company, choosing the employment, choosing the partner, and whatnot. Here the problem is, if you start imposing all your ideas, child will not learn to take decisions. For example, in case if you feel that your child is good to become an engineer, then don't say that you have to become an engineer. There is no other way. That's not the way. You can suggest that I feel that probably you can become a good engineer. Or in the recent times, a lot of middle class families are aspiring for bureaucracy. So I am seeing a lot of aspirants for civil services. Here also what happens is many parents say that you should become an IAS officer. This creates very heavy burden on the child, because of which the performance goes on decreasing rather increasing. Rather, if you could suggest to the child that I feel that you have the capability to become an IAS officer because you have interest in a lot of other things. Again, while suggesting, it is good if you can give the reasoning why you feel so. That if you feel that the child can experiment in certain things, or child can uh, delve into certain things, then certainly you have to give a reasoning that why do you feel so. So uh, with this, I would try to conclude my uh, presentation saying that my only simple suggestion is never react, but try to respond to your child. If you start reacting to your child, then child will get confused. Instead of that, if you start responding by taking certain time, then the uh, nurturing of the child will be much more interesting, much more positive, and much more beneficial for the child in growing its own personality. Thank you. I'm open for questions. You can throw your questions here.
So, hey Akshara, Gaurav here again. Thank you for this informative session. I
Yeah.
now request parents to, as Akshara mentioned, just throwing your questions in the chat box below, and Mr. Akshara will gladly answer those questions.
Yeah, I have received one statement from Harini Ramaratnam saying she has trained her daughter to do the journaling to let out her emotions. It's a really important thing that uh, I also suggest a lot of my clients that journaling is really important. So that is one of the best ways to put your emotions out. Thank you, Harini. That's an interesting takeaway for other parents too. Oh, that's an interesting. Any other questions?
Hey, so Akshara, we have a question from Gitu. She's
Huh.
asking you to throw some parenting tips on handling teenage boys.
Huh. Uh, Again, uh, i- teenage is very sensitive period. Uh, there are two kinds of aspects that we look at in parenting. That is, one is demanding parents, and another is responsive parents. Now, if you are demanding, that means you expect what, or do you dictate the child to do whatever you want. And if you're responsive, then you respond to the child's feelings and its needs. Now, especially in the teenage, as I said, you have to create a space for sharing of emotions of the child. And also, it is always good that you allow the child certain autonomy. At the same time, you be responsive and treat your child as your friend, so that you can uh, get to know what is happening with the teenage boy, so that if there is any kind of confusion, especially in the adolescence, many children face this identity crisis and role confusion. So if you are always there emotionally with the child, then probably you will be able to handle whatever the child is going through. How to handle tantrum in toddlers. There is a study in psychology that is, now when the child is showing its all tantrums, if you show a very cool calm face instead of you getting annoyed or you getting irritated because of the tantrum, and make the child calm down, then certainly this behavior of tantrum gets reduced. Many times what happens is, when the child is showing all its tantrum, the mother or the father get anxious, and they also show a similar a facial expression to the child, which promotes it to continue the tantrum. If the reinforcement that you give after once the child shows tantrum, that is also very important. That if you give whatever the child asks for after it showing tantrum, then it gets conditioned to to show the tantrums, to get the things as and when it wants. So you should be careful in showing your calmness and peace even when the child shows tantrum, and then also be cautious while giving the reinforcement to the child. How to deal with arrogant behavior from the child. Hmm. Um, Arrogant behavior, again, many a times may be an imitation from other children, because many times when children are playing in a same place, many times they may be observing other children, and then if they show arrogance and they are rewarded, then probably this child also starts learning that arrogance is the best way to get things done. So you have to educate that arrogance is not the way, rather being humble is the way for uh, seeking any help or seeking anything. So educating probably is the better way rather than punishing, because arrogance may be a kind of a temporary behavior shown by the child. I don't think it is a permanent behavior if the child is educated at the right time.
Right. Thank you, Akshara. I have another question here from Mr. MH.
Huh.
So, how to motivate or convince kids to study, especially the subjects which they don't like?
Hmm. Uh, Again, till 10th standard, maybe the child has to learn subjects which it doesn't like. But later I would suggest to promote your child to go with its passion rather than forcing it to go for some other or taking some other subjects which it doesn't like. But for every subject there are methods to learn. In most of the schools, what I have observed is many teachers are not able to convey the methods to learn the particular subject in more easier way. For example, while studying geography you have to have visualizations, otherwise geography becomes really difficult. So in similar way, when it comes to mathematics you have to have some abstract thinking. So if you are able to give this idea or teach this methodology of learning particular subject, then it becomes easy for child to learn. So unless it becomes easier, certainly child will not be motivated to learn that subject. So rather than emphasizing or focusing on motivating the child to study it harder, make the whole learning process easier so that child can learn it more easily and comfortably.
Thanks, Akshara. We have another question here from Mr. Amit. So
Hmm.
he says he has two sons who is 8 years and one is 1.5 years old. So
Hmm.
how can we create a great bonding between them?
Huh. So probably he is finding the age gap as a kind of difficulty. um, I too have a brother who is 7 years elder, but um, it really doesn't become a kind of gap in case if you try to create some common activities for both the kids to play with or do with. Say for example, if your elder son is made to do certain activities with the younger son, uh, or even you can ask your elder son to take care of your younger son at certain point of time, uh, that will kind of create a kind of a bonding between the younger son and elder son. Because of course a young elder son will be interested to play outside with his friends, and he may not be ready to take care of the child which is smaller. But at least for some time, when you're also there, if you can give certain responsibilities, or if you can share some uh, uh, time for the elder son to spend some time with the younger son, probably that will be one way of going about it to increase the bonding between them.
Yeah, thanks, Akshara. So Mr. Prashant here is asking, how to keep your child motivated and active so that they know they can be socially responsible.
Huh. Now, yeah, socially responsible. Now again, um making here again, I am not in line with the idea of motivation. Rather, if you give the autonomy to the child, then certainly child will start taking responsibility. Now, whether it is social responsibility, when we talk about social responsibility, you educate the child that look, this is a social property or public property, and we have to protect it. uh, Environmental issues can also be brought in. I am not sure what age the kid is, so it will be little absurd to answer just like that. But I think instead of motivating the child to work or develop a social responsibility, you try to bring the social responsibility in the consciousness of the child. So if that consciousness is developed, then you need not motivate the child to do it. The child will start doing it on its own.
All right. Here is another question from a parent who is asking, what is the reasonable amount of
Hmm.
screen timing for an 8-year-old
Hmm.
child?
Um, yeah, screen timing is another very big issue in even uh, in the recent times. Even in the last national international Congress of Mental Health, we had a discussion on this. um, the problem is there is nothing like some optimum screen timing for kids. So I would randomly or based on my generalization, if I can say, an hour a day would be more than sufficient. Instead of electronic gadgets, I would expect parents to engage their children in more kinesthetic activities and physical things, toys, so that they will start learning to work with them.
All right.
Hmm.
So I have another question here from Gitu.
Hmm.
How to handle teens who consistently test the parents' patience?
How to handle teens? Does it mean that parents are not impatient, or uh, whether teen is trying to be on its own, which becomes a kind of, can this question be a little more clear, because I'm not really clear with the question.
So Gitu, can you type in your question again more precisely? Meanwhile, we'll take another question from Mr. Devashri. So
Yeah.
what could be the possible way of performing not in consistent manner? He has a 7-year-old child. Sometimes he gets full marks in mathematics, and the other time he does mistakes in simple things like counting.
Hmm. um, we have to look at when we look at exam performance, uh, sometimes it is momentary. Maybe that day the child was not ready to appear for the test, or maybe something else was running in the mind of the child, because of which the performance might have gone wrong. You have to probably sit with the child and understand what happened on the day when the child couldn't really perform well in the exam. Because if it gets full marks, which means it has got um, arithmetic IQ. So if it commits mistakes some other time, certainly it might have got distracted, because of which this problem might have arrived. So it is better if you can sit with the child and understand what went wrong or what was the problem that day, and do not scold the child for getting lower score. Just be compassionate and make or create a space for the child to open up, to say what was the difficulty that day.
Thanks, Akshara, for that. So I have
Hmm.
an offline question here from Mr. Vikas. So
Hmm.
how to take a child 3.5 years age old to come out of
Hmm.
habit of mobile overuse?
Ha. This is again very important aspect that we have to look at. uh, First of all, we as psychologists agree that parents have to become role models. most of the times what I observe in many houses is the parents themselves are busy with their phones even after coming from their workplace. So when they are busy, they become role models for the child. So unless parents stop using their smartphones or also engaging in TV or laptop after coming home, child, you can't really stop the child from going for it. And uh, you may try to convince, or also you should not give smartphone whenever the child asks for. You should decide, or you should say that only from this time to this time you can engage yourself with smartphone, otherwise you are not supposed to. And also try to convince the child that the smartphone is not as good as it looks. So you, the parents, should become the role models first, and then you can try convincing the child.
All right. I have another offline question, Akshara.
Hmm.
My child does not like to study and he is in class 4. So, what is the best solution for this?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, so my child is currently in class 4 and he does not like to
Huh.
study. So, what is the solution to it?
Um, does it mean that the child is not interested only in school activity, or is it interested in some other activity? Probably that has to be explored, because mm, we have a wrong notion that if the child is not performing well in the curriculum that has been prescribed in the school, then child is not intelligent or not good, or good for nothing. Certainly what I believe is the talent may lie in different areas. Child may be good at painting or craft or some other creative aspects also. So probably the parent has to explore what the child is interested in, and then uh, think what has to be done. Because and also sometimes what happens is, if the child is good at painting, probably other subjects may be taught through painting also, which has to be explored. So irrespective of the class of the child, this needs to be found out what really the child is passionate about.
Thanks, Akshara. Here I have a parent, Shruti, who is
Hmm.
asking how to help a 6-year-old to get interest in reading English without
Hmm.
losing patience.
Okay, may I ask another counter question? What the child is really interested in, if not reading English?
Shruti, would you mind answering to that on the chat box? So she is interested in painting, Akshara.
Okay. Uh, Again, as I told in my presentation, uh, maybe the child is not really interested to read English at this point of time, and may develop the interest later sometime, because children show behavior. uh, I mean, they change behavior with time. Say a child which is interested in doing something at this point of time may not be interested at all after 1 or 2 years. So instead of forcing the child to read English, probably you can start sharing or start telling the stories in English, so that child may develop some interest, saying, okay, if listening to the story it in itself is so interesting, then why not I start reading? So probably this kind of method may be used by the parent.
Okay. So I have a question here from Ebjaz.
Huh.
What do we do as parents when the kids do not obey us?
Uh, Again, it is similar to the question that is about arrogance. uh, I am not totally against punishment. uh, uh, some kind of punishment is also required to keep the children under certain control, because sometimes they may be exposed to wrong models in the public space, because of which they may develop certain behavior. So controlled punishment is also important thing in developing a good personality in the child. So child should know when will it get punished and when will it not. So if the child is not obeying at all, probably certain withdrawals may also work. Say if the child is not obeying to do certain say homework at home, then maybe the parents say, if you unless you finish the homework, I will not provide you food, or unless you provide finish the homework, I will not allow you to watch TV, or unless you finish homework, I will not take you to play. Something of this kind may also be useful in making the child to obey to the parents.
Right. Thanks, Akshara. So I have another question here from Mr. Bhatt. Does the curriculum really matter? As nowadays there's a lot of options such as IB, CBSE, ICSE, Cambridge, and etc.
Absolutely. I'm agreeing with him, saying him or her, I do not know. uh, Absolutely, the children should be exposed to different ways of education system, so that they will explore what suits them. I am also in favor of informal schools, because they also provide a space for the child to explore its talents and interests, so that it can pursue it further. So I agree with the opinion. We need not restrict the children for the state syllabus or central syllabus or whatever. We have to allow the child to experiment.
Thanks, Ashkara. I think we'll take the last question for the day. And it will be great if you could sum this up. So a parent here is asking, totally confused. Should I follow disciplined parenting, or shall I be easy to go on the child?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, so a parent here, she says that she's totally confused whether she
Huh.
should follow disciplined parenting, or
Huh.
should she be easy to go on the child?
Okay, I'll briefly explain 4 types of parenting, and then we can conclude the session for the day. Um, Based on the similar same thing, that is demanding parenting and responsive parenting. So when the demanding parenting is lesser on the scale, and also responsive parenting is also lesser on the scale, then the parenting becomes negligent and ignorant, which is not at all good. Okay, then if we go to the second category, then if demanding parenting scale is lower and responsive parenting is on the higher scale, then the parents are, or that parenting style is called as permissive parenting. Okay, here permissive parenting refers to the parent is very responsive to the child, but the parent is not setting the rules and boundaries to the child, because of which child may end up experimenting a lot, which may not be, or which may go beyond the limits. Now coming to the higher side on the demanding parenting. So when we have high demanding parent or demanding parenting on the higher scale, and responsive parenting on the lower scale, then it becomes authoritative parenting, where the parent is more rule bound and or sets a boundary to the child, and is not responsive to the feelings of the child. Now the fourth method or fourth parenting style, that is higher on demanding parenting, and also higher on the responsive parenting, which is called as authoritative parenting. And as per the psychologists, or most of the psychologists agree that authoritative parenting is most desired one, because while you set the rules and boundaries for the child, you're also responsive to the feelings of the child. So you get to know whether the rules and boundaries that you have set for the child is appropriate for the child. So uh, instead of being too disciplined, if you're at the same time, if you're also responsive to the feelings of the child, that will be the best way to go with. I also conduct a workshop on parenting, where say 15 to 20 members are involved, and a kind of 3.5 hour session is taken. I can also conduct it at different places if there is a need.
Yeah. Uh,
Um
Yeah. All right, Akshara.
Shall we
Thank you.
conclude with that?
Yeah. Thank you so much. The
I
last
hope.
question, the last part of yours was really informative. Yeah. So, this was, I'm sure this was an inspiring and informative session for all the parents present here. And, parents have had a positive impact. So, parents, I request you all to rate and post reviews of this webinar on the SchoolConnects mobile app, as well as on Facebook, which will obviously help the other parents. For the recording of this webinar, the video recording and the audio recording will be available on our mobile app under the events tab, under the events section on our mobile app. So you can just download the app from the Play Store, and you'll be able to rate, review, post reviews, as well as watch the video recording of this webinar. So Mr. Akshara, we from the entire team of SchoolConnects thank you once again for taking time from your hectic schedule and being present with us here all. And parents, again, thank you all for making this a successful webinar. And apologies for the first 5 minutes of technical glitch which we had. And I'm sure we'll work on that. So yes, guys, thank you so much, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you, Akshara. Thanks, Akshara. Thanks.